I've called this sick to death. I'm sick to death of journalists like Mark Robertson being able to continue with a line of thinking or questioning which goes unchallenged. I heard an interview on SEN last Saturday with Trent Cotchin, who I need to divulge is my son-in-law. And Robertson, being one of the interviewers, continued with a line of questioning that he has been focused on for some time, and that's about Trent's tackling. Robertson's also questioned Trent's leadership qualities and has been making judgment calls about who should lead Richmond, which I find really interesting when Mark is not inside the Richmond Football Club, observing and understanding what goes on, who does what, when and how. Anyway, back to the tackling attack by Mark. Interesting, in 2012, when Trent come equal second in the Brownlow medal, Trent averaged 4.86 tackles per game. Thus far in 2016, he's averaging 4.82 tackles per game. That is less than one tackle over the 19 games for the year thus far. It's interesting because I cannot remember Mark questioning Trent's tackling ability in 2012. It appears from where I sit that Mark simply has a bee in his bonnet about Trent. Mark said on radio on the weekend that he also praises people. Well, Mark, you had your chance. Did Mark see Trent's smother against the momentum of play that resulted in Richmond's first goal on Friday night, that many are saying turned the game? Did Mark praise Trent for that? Did Mark praise Trent and his 5 tackles for the night to maintain his average for the year at 4.82 tackles per game? Particularly as Mark had highlighted that Trent had had no tackles the week before. No, Mark did not praise Trent. Mark simply asked Trent whether he feels that he's being unfairly targeted for his 0 tackles last week. Luckily for Mark, Trent's such a quality person that he'll not be brought down to Mark's level of conversation. I can remember Mark talking about Mick Malthouse some years ago when he was coach at Collingwood Football Club, and what Mark would do, the changes he'd make, etc., if he was in Mick Malthouse's shoes. I remember turning to my wife and saying exactly this. 1, Mark's not Mick Malthouse. 2, and to steal a phrase from my late father, as long as Mark's backside points to the ground, Mark will never be Mick Malthouse. And 3, I started wondering, who is Mark Robertson? What has been Mark's success as a player that gives him such wonderful insights? Who has Mark coached at any level and or in any sport to the ultimate success of being the best in the year? If I could ever meet with Mark face to face, I would say exactly the same thing to him in person. I remember thinking that Mark has no idea who Mick Malthouse is, how many people that Mick has helped on and off the field, inside and outside of football. I remember thinking that when Mark Robertson has influenced as many young men's lives in a positive way, because he's very good at doing it in a negative way, and lifted young men from where they were to a level much greater, as Mick has done over and over and over and over again, then I was feeling and thinking that Mark may be in a position to make comment about what he would do in Mick's shoes. In fact, an old saying popped into my mind. Before you criticise a man or woman, best if you walk a mile in his or her shoes. I was left wondering whether Mark had walked a mile in Mick's shoes, and thinking that Mark Robertson would probably be best to stick to reporting what he has observed, which may have some resemblance to the facts, because we all invariably see things slightly differently, even when we're looking at or watching the same thing. I was listening to Mike Sheen being interviewed on radio as I was going to work last week after Mike's fireside chat with Mark Jackson, where, if my memory serves me correct, Mike said that Mark Robertson had called Mike Sheen after watching the interview on TV and asked Mike why he would have interviewed Jacko and why Mike would ever let that go to air. Now, I can only speak from my experiences with Mike Sheen, and I do have a different perspective than Mark Jackson, but I may also have had different experiences than Jacko has had with Mike. To me, the fact that Mike Sheen allowed the show to go to air is the very difference between a Mike Sheen in the sporting world and a Mark Robertson. Mike Sheen will actually front up. I remember listening to Mark Robertson on radio literally sook up when the Collingwood players banned him from interviews because of an article he wrote. There's an old saying, live by the sword, die by the sword. Mark should have copped it on the chin and publicly stated that he could understand the players feeling the way they were, that he looks forward to the ban being lifted, and simply moved on. Now I could go on and on here because people like Mark Robertson have been allowed to get away with so much garbage over time, which can have an effect on people's careers, their livelihoods and their families. And I'm just feeling that it's time that someone stood up and suggested that there should be some boundaries erected. I'm Rick Kennedy, I'm sick and tired, and I'm now over and out.